And I lost everything. I have nothing left. Feel free to share. I do not have social media, however, there are countless people and organizations who have all my materials, to include incomplete transcripts, evidence, both incomplete disclosure packages, numerous correspondences, etc., who can verify my story in detail. This video very briefly tells my story. It began December 2012 and continues to this day. On May 4th, 2013, it was clear why I was being beaten and almost being shot and killed. This being because of December 2012. Then they realized December 2012 was a lie. I'm left partly disabled, suffering from post-traumatic stress, with my personal and professional reputation and integrity ruined as being not credible, because I had proven all the lies against me. As my case dragged on to the second year mark, I had filed my lawsuit on the 11th hour. I'm now entering year 5, with the lawsuit stayed. Several years ago, a doctor said it would cost a lot of money to have the bodily damages somewhat repaired. It may be too late for that now. Plus all the money I've spent defending this and all the lost potential income. This video also shows the state of mind I'm in as I wait for whatever comes next. This has been my state of mind over the many years this has lasted. By the way, I have no intentions of harming myself. I have a great small support group of friends. Some may say I need to see a shrink. I remind people of the Rosenhan experiment and numerous other people who speak out against these quacks. Speculation of observation is not science, no different than any other belief system. To believe is to make an uninformed conclusion. By not addressing the source of any problem is not solving any problem. My problem is the foundation of what I'm dealing with today. If you're already familiar with my story, or you want to skip sections, just click on the timeline in the description box below. Today is September 1st, 2017, and the time is 9:49 a.m. I started to record this video, so this is take 2, and it just seemed to be skipping around too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a story, but I'm going to back up a few years from where the story that I want to tell actually started. And it's going to be quick, because I don't want to get into the details of it. But this video, for anyone watching, is about a false accusation by a female, which turned into a police brutality case, which turned into dealing with what the media has deemed the most corrupt court system and police force in all of Canada. Sorry, I'm just... my mind kind of messed up with everything that I've been dealing with over the past... I'm going into the 5th year now. So anyway, my story before 2012, say. Long story short, I lost everything. Went through a really hard period of my life. I tried to recover from that by taking an in-house position And by the time 2009 rolled around, my whole world collapsed. And I thought it was bad then. So I became destitute. I became homeless around 2009. That in-house position that I mentioned, it was supposed to be a 6-month contract to set up their internal litigation department for debt recovery using litigation, and I ended up being there for a year and a half. And so I became homeless in 2009. I also had to deal with the reality that I gave myself 10 years to find out what happened to my wife, who, more of a descriptive, went missing in that didn't know what happened to her, where she was. I flew overseas and did manage to speak to her on the phone briefly, and then she was, let's just say, exported to a small country in Africa. So my personal mission and promise was to find her and help her. And anyway, I said I would give myself 10 years. 10 years was 2009. 2009 came and went. I will say in 2011 I found out that she was okay, and the source of how I found to contact her was surprised that she never replied to me, and they said that she has never forgotten me. Now, I just want to be very clear on this particular topic. As the years went by, over the 10 years, from 1999 to 2009, it wasn't so much that I would have been expecting us to be together, live happily ever after, anything. I didn't have that delusion. I wanted to keep my promise because of what she had found herself in. And hadn't been with a woman or in a relationship since her. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anything. But anyway, that's the end of that part of the story. So I was homeless, wrote my first book, and I was hoping that, well, I could make some money and help myself get back on my feet, but the publisher ended up being a scam. Never seen a penny of that. And to close off that part of the story, it was the summer of 2015 when I finally got the rights back to my book. So while I was homeless, so that was in 2010 with the book. 2011, there was some people, government people, who got wind of me, and I still maintained volunteering with food drives and stuff while I was homeless, and helping people carry food to their vehicles, and just listening to their story, saying, so, I remember some people saying, oh, I'm going to lose my home, I'm going to lose my apartment. as we're walking past my vehicle, I'm thinking, well, that's my home right there. But it wasn't about me, it was about them. So between the volunteering that I did and meeting with these small government funded organization, I managed to get back to school. I did another year of school. Wasn't eligible because I had already post-secondary, so they took care of all that, and the provincial government where I was spent, I think, like $35,000 covering everything to become, what do they call them, like I ended up becoming a mental health worker. It's like a community support worker or something. Big difference in money, but it wasn't about money at the time, and I thought, yeah, I'll actually help people. And I rolled my eyes because as the story unfolds, you'll understand. So I graduated and I went through hell. The first part of it, I was homeless, so I was really struggling trying to survive. And I remember during the time I was homeless, sleeping in truck stops and parks and all sorts of places, and that's when I really got a taste for how police can be real assholes. And I'm going to tie in something with the story that I want to tell with what I just said, because there might be a connection. But I found out when I was the last half of going back to school, I had to endure in that building. It was an old retirement home, and my audio recorder that I always carry with me forever, like not the same one obviously, but I always have an audio recorder or two with me, came in handy because there was assholes living in other rooms, and I had money stolen from it. Just the whole thing just became a bloody mess because there was a lady who was working there was kind enough to help get me in at the start, but she liked me, so there was a hitch to all this, and I rejected her. The friends that she established that work in there made my life hell for months. And as soon as I graduated, I was gone. So it was about within a couple of months, not even, I made a choice to go west to start a new life. I had an opportunity for a new career. I was on top of my game again after being homeless. I was feeling really good, really positive, and took a 3-day bus journey. I'll never take a bus again, long distance, even city buses. Yeah. So, sorry if I look a bit rough. I really didn't get much sleep last night, and it's cold. So so that would have been April of 2012. I ended up in the province where I'm sitting right now. I ended up cleaning public toilets for about a month. until I landed a job with a mental health organization. And that month was brutal because I was working with young people, late teens, early 20s, most of them university. And what I would discover over the past several years is the social justice feminist mindset that I was dealing with, and I had no idea what was going on. But I had some issues there, and I'll just leave that story for another time maybe. There's a video on that. So working at this organization, this mental health organization, I wasn't there 2 weeks. And the executive director who hired me, him and I got along great, clicked awesome. And he had some big plans for me because of my career history. I've accomplished a lot in my life, worked hard for it, got screwed for it, but whatever. And we were coming out of his office, and at the time his office was one big room. Later it would be partitioned into 2 rooms. And I was standing in his doorway, and he was standing to my right, and he pointed at a female, saying to me, "You know, you can have sex with her if you want." And I look at the female, and there's a reason why I'm bringing her up and everything else. This starts getting into the story I want to talk about. And I looked at him like, I don't want to have sex with anyone. I'm not interested. Not that I'm not interested in women. I just haven't. A lot of years. And it was just the year before that I found out that my wife was quote-unquote okay. Her former wife, or wife that was, I don't know even what, we're still legally married. Anyway, I wasn't interested in having sex with this person. I just thought it was kind of odd. I was new. You know, you have those, the jitters of working at a new place, etc. So we just walked, he went back into his office and I continued on. And then it was about a week or two, or a couple weeks after that, the provincial health services started interviewing everybody, including staff. And I had no idea what was really going on. And they were asking, we were being interviewed separately in the boardroom, and they were asking some kind of, what I thought at the time was peculiar questions. And I forget what the question was now. If there's something that I should, if I know of something that's going on there. And I remember I looked down at the table and I'm thinking, I don't need more shit in my life. So thinking back what this executive director had told me, I said, all I said was, I said, I'm new, I don't know too much, but there's things here that are very questionable or whatever. I try to really strongly hint that there's something going on here, but I don't know. And that was it. And a few weeks after that, that executive director walked. Now, during the time before, we were talking about my heading up a division of this mental health organization, so that's where we were headed. And then about a month after he left, a new executive director stepped in, and him and I we clashed. Like, you couldn't get more of a clash. And it wasn't so much me, because I tend to get along with everyone, but it was his own character, his own insecurities, his own inability. And when members and staff all come to me for whatever, it made him feel inferior. Even members during meetings that they would be a part of would stand up and say that I should have been the one running the place, because I get things done properly. And they would be standing right beside him, and I'd be like, oh God, I mean, it's probably true, but that happened more than one occasion. So anyway, you can kind of get where I'm going with all this. So in November of 2012, I resigned because him and I were just, yeah, it was pretty bad. Now, here's where the story begins that I want to talk about. And sorry for dragging this on. It's hard to talk about. I'm going through a lot right now, and I'm just trying to keep my shit together as I'm telling this story on video. This is not the first time I've told it on video. Snippets over the years. So November of 2012, I resigned. He asked if I could try to work things out with him. Really, he needed me there. And I'm not blowing my own horn or anything. So I said, sure. The beginning of December of 2012, a female attendee, the very same one that the first executive director said I could have sex with if I want, accused myself and another male co-worker of some sort of sexual assault. I don't even know what. Going back to December 2012, and no one wanted to talk to me about what happened. That day when I learned about it, I was out, I came back to my office, there was a cop there, and I thought they were just wanting to talk to the female about an accident that she was involved in a year prior, and she was pretty upset about it. So I went to my office, and the second executive director came in, kind of, chummy and everything else, and which is kind of odd for him. But I thought, well, the cop and her are talking in his office, he's just trying to kill time, and who knows, maybe he's trying to reconcile our working relationship. The cop came into my office, didn't say a word, and leaned up. I had two windows, and he was just kind of leaned up on whatever I had there. Didn't say a word, and they both left. Never thought nothing of it. At the end of the day, now this is in the early afternoon, I went to leave, and I was taking public transit, the train. And it wasn't uncommon for staff to go with members on the train or the bus or whatever. I mean, if you run into them, this organization, for the most part, if you were to walk in, you wouldn't be able to distinguish staff from the members in this mental health organization. People were able to come and go freely. Like there was no formal any kind of counseling. However, if somebody wanted to talk, that was also available. But it was just, I don't know, it was just kind of a bullshit organization that the provincial government sponsoring 60% of. But I guess it creates jobs, and it just makes everyone feel good. But well, mind you, there's people there that definitely, with brain damage and stuff, that benefited from it. So I was leaving the office that day, and she asked if she can go to the train station with me. Now, twice a week, she would take the same train as I would, because where I was living at that time, briefly, was an area where she would go twice a week. So I said, yeah, sure. And as we walk, now, you gotta paint this picture of the setup. So the main doors of the organization are in the back of the main building, this office complex building. So if you wanted to get to the main street and then continue towards downtown, which is like a block away, you could either walk around the entire building, or you can cut through the middle of the building through a set of double doors, past some elevators, and down the front of the main building. So this is what I did. The walk from the front door of the organization to the double doors, 5-10 seconds, if. Walk out, turn left, walk in. So as soon as, we were, opening the door to walk out of the organization, asked her if she was okay. She's like, I can't talk to you about it. And I think, as a joke or something, I said, like, what, specifically me? And she said, yeah, or something. And that's when I'm like, what? What do you, like? And she goes, I can't, if I tell you, you can't tell anyone that I told you. And she made me promise. I'm like, well, sure, like, what's going on? Keep in mind, this is all within, like, seconds. And so we get through the double doors of the main building to go past the elevators. Keep in mind, this is 5 o'clock, busiest time of any office building. The lobby was packed of people, and she talks in a very loud voice. I would even say obnoxiously loud. And she said, you and are being investigated for raping me. And I was in shock. And she was saying something. It was just like it was all tuned out, and all professionalism was gone, and I just kept repeating, "Get the fuck away from me." She walked to the second set of double doors, and I think she actually just stepped outside. She goes, "I want to talk to you about this," and I'm just, get the fuck away from me. So she went back through the building to go to the organization, and there was a smoking area out front, and I'm just stunned. So I was texting the second executive director about what she just told me, and he's like, "Yeah, I wanted to tell you about it tomorrow, you and." And I'm like, what pissed me off the most, hurt the most, like just these mixed emotions, is the fact that everyone in that place, staff and members, that afternoon knew about what was going on, except myself. And I tried to talk to everybody, and all I knew the days that followed was it was an anonymous tip to a third party that wasn't affiliated to the organization. It was a university. Via an untraceable email. That's all I knew. I had conflicting stories of the investigations continuing. It's not. I had no idea, but no one wanted to talk to me, and I tried. She started writing me letters, leaving them on my office desk. I was staying right the fuck away from that shit. And the whole irony was, talking with other people, especially staff, about her specifically, I was said that she has this big neon sign over her head, like, stay the fuck away, or fucked in the head, because you see this coming from a mile away. Never dreamt. I only ever had a limited professional working relationship with her, and never dreamt that even staying the fuck away from that type could still get you in shit. So she wanted to meet and talk, so I had an idea. Had an audio recorder. Now, I ordered a pen video audio recorder that didn't come in time in the mail. Paid a good buck for it, and it actually worked pretty good. So I ended up just meeting with her in the boardroom. She was sitting to my 2 o'clock position on the other side of the table, and I was facing the glass door. And I was talking to her about one of the letters, because the letter just didn't make sense. She was talking as if she was not the alleged victim. It just, nothing of the letter made any sense. And I kind of got a loose statement from her that nothing happened, but I was scared shitless, and I thinking, well, this is not going to be enough. But I never thought that I'd ever have another opportunity to talk to her. I had left the organization at the end of that month, as planned, and my last day there was we had like a early New Year's dance or some shit like that, and I was sitting in the dining area. There was nobody else around. I just kind of thinking about how much I'm going to miss that place, and a lot of people shed tears when they found out that I was leaving, and it was kind of an emotional time. Anyway, this female comes up, smiling and happy, and she pulls the chair in front of me, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And she looks at me, she goes, so you're going to kill yourself now? And I looked at her like, why would I kill myself? And she goes, because you're not working here anymore. Now, I already told her that I resigned the month before, so that my resigning had nothing to do with her. And that was it. Now, sometime in January of 2013, there's where the train station ends up. There's a mall, and I had other jobs lined up, but I got euchred. This second executive director, I don't know what the hell was being said about me. Anyway, a lot of shit going on. So it was in the afternoon, sitting there in the food court, and this female comes along and sits down. And I'm like, I have an opportunity now. Now, I didn't have the audio recorder on that first time, because I would have to pull it out of my pocket, and it would be too obvious. So I talked to her briefly, but I did text a former colleague that I was talking to her at that time, had it all documented. I did everything I could to document everything thoroughly. And she asked if I would be here later in the week or whatever, and I said, maybe, yeah. So I said, yeah, because I'm thinking I got a plan. And by now that video pen thing I already had. So we would meet, not like scheduled meeting, but it was just always in public. Always in public. I would meet with her at the mall, in the food court, or outside. And then I ended up moving. Now, my original objective was to, in order to get a confession that's not coerced, she would have to, I can't lead the question, you know what I'm saying? So I had to establish some sort of friendship, but I had to be very careful not to cross any lines, not just for my personal sake, but for the validity of any recordings. So I ended up moving, and I thought, shit. I was making progress with an audio, and by now I had a vehicle, so she would come down by train, not close to where I was living after I moved, but it was more convenient for me. Rather than going downtown, which was a nightmare. We would always meet in public, like at Tim Hortons parking lot, or just always in the parking lot. 'Cause, you know, we both smoked, so we could talk, smoke, audio recorder going. I started noticing things being stashed in my vehicle, personal items of hers and money. I'd always return it to her then the next time I would see her. I wasn't working at the time, so I was struggling with that. I'm like, my God, I'm borderline destitute. And over the span of the next 4 months, meeting with her, say once every couple of weeks, maybe, I got to the point where, bingo, I have enough times, more than once, more than twice, of us talking about this December anonymous tip thing, and then she said, at one point, I said by the end of it, I guess, I did the best I could to get her to talk. Said and did whatever it took. And then, bingo, she said, you know, I really fucked things up. Also around towards that time, I had set up my pen recorder in my vehicle and made it a point to, she would stash this stuff when I would exit the vehicle, say to go into Tim's or Tim Hortons or, you know, bathroom or whatever. So I made it a point, and I got her on video stashing stuff. So I had everything. Had enough. And I thought, okay, I gotta wean her off quickly, but I don't want to do it abruptly because I don't want to upset her, piss her off. Now I'm trying to think, what should I do with what I have? Do I sit on it if anything happens? Because you have to remember, I was planning on leaving to go back to my province of origin the June of 2013. I had nothing because there was nothing. So I had to somewhat maybe create something, but like establishing a friendship from her perspective more. And I'm doing this on the fly. Never done anything like this before. What is there, like a manual? I've spent the previous couple weeks encouraging the idea that, hey, let's take a break you know, and I was just really trying to play up all sorts of different things to get her to go along with it. Late evening, we went from, well, let me just stop there for a sec. About a week or two before, I was trying to get police harassment, heavy, especially in her company in a Tim Hortons parking lot. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what the hell is going on. And it was audio recorded, the whole event. They wouldn't say anything, but they would box me in, not say a word, and 5-10 minutes later drive away. I'm trying to figure out what. So that night we stopped by Tim's, grabbed tea, bagel donut or something, and we went to a park. I knew there was a park close by on the way down, and it was weird because she said she was texting her sister. And so I'm just sitting there texting with a buddy back home, and she wanted one more. She was really insistent on one more smoke. Sure, okay, but we gotta go, right? And then she points out over my left, a police cube van traveling at a high rate of speed. And I didn't think nothing of it. She turned around on her seat and said, they're coming into the park, because the entrance to the park is behind me to my 7 o'clock position. So I was saying that the entrance to the park is at my 7 o'clock position. And they pull in, come up. The younger of the cop, hard to talk with the halls, he runs to the back of my vehicle, and then as he's running back to the other cop, all I hear him saying is, yeah, that is, or that's. Meanwhile, she's grabbed my right arm and repeating, don't let them hurt me. And I'm trying to think, what the hell is going on right now? He's charging towards me like a bull in a china shop. And literally a bull in a china shop. He looks like Jabba the Hutt. Short, fat rolls from his chin all the way down, bald. So and then the long story short, he wants to identify me, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, because this is playing out so unusual. So I had my cigarette. Actually, how I have my cigarette, I'm leaning like this, talking to him, and the third time he asked me, he looks down, he pauses it, and he looks back up at me and says, "Oh, well, the park is closed." And I didn't believe him, just the way he said it. I'm like, what do you mean the park is closed? Like, there's no signs, there's no gates, there's nothing. And he's looking around over his shoulder, like, my first thought was, he's checking to see if there's anyone around, because something's going to go down. And I'm trying to wordcraft my words as not to agitate him any further. And all I said was, well, we could leave if you want us to. Like, I don't know what's going on. He puts his hands up, like in a boxing stance, and yells, "It's too late for that. Get out of the car now." And I just remember thinking, oh shit. And I was trying to word craft my words. I didn't want to get out of the vehicle. One, I didn't want him to start punching me or saying that I jumped out and attacked him. As it will turn out, no matter what you do in that situation with cops, you're fucked. Nothing ever good comes from these people. And I was trying to say something about not accepting his authority because, and then the next thing I know, I can't breathe, and I'm grabbing his wrist, and the other cop is now on top of my dash, and I briefly looked over and I noted them, like she almost smiled at him. It was what had happened, as I would find out later. He sucker punched me and knocked me out, and as I was regaining consciousness, I realized he was choking me and I couldn't breathe, and the other cop had a gun to my head. He was on the dash, like right there, and I'm in the corner of my seat, and it was like his voice was getting louder and louder, but it was just, I guess, when you're knocked out, your hearing kind of goes, and all he kept saying was, get out, get out. And I'm trying to, but he's holding me down, smiling. So I pushed his hand out of the way, and I get out, and I took a passive stance. Like I turned around, took a passive stance, put my hands behind my back, because I'm like, I'm trying so hard not to I was trying to diffuse the situation throughout this whole event. Anyway, they end up handcuffing me, and they found intestinal gas pills in my pocket, and for some reason they thought I was going to drug her with that, and they loosened the handcuffs, clamped down on them, and beat the shit out of me to the point where I ended up in the hospital. I'm partly disabled now as a result, and I was in the back of the police cube van for a couple of hours in pain. Some other cops came. And the door to the police cube van where I was sitting inside was to my left, and some cops opened it up and started laughing, and I was in pain. The handcuffs were hurting, and they put me in a holding cell till morning. And the next day I was charged with assaulting an officer, obstruction, and resisting arrest. The officers were very clear that it was all three charges on three separate alleged events of that night. That was May 5th, 2013. I met with the female after the weeks that followed. She said she volunteered to be my witness of what happened. And then in June of 2013, she puts a restraining order on me, which was another shock. The trial starts. Well, I rebutted the restraining order, by the way, and ended up having a mutual restraining order. And I'm like, holy shit. And everyone's talking like I had this long relationship with her. And no one wanted to listen to me. No one. The trial began November of 2013. And in a nutshell, the cop testified that they arrived to the park prior to when it closed. And that had to do with the last text message from my friend that evening. And I suffer post-traumatic stress from that event. So during the redirect of the Crown with the cop, the Crown realized that the cop was lying and told him, okay, you're done, that's it. And that whole redirect would be missing from the trial transcripts. The matter was adjourned. It ended up being 15 months before the second cop testified, and the first cop brought back. During their testimonies, the first cop began with this whole false narrative with the female, and he was just painting this picture that I was like, I don't know, some evil monster. And basically, he said in the redirects that they did what they did, so I won't do that to anyone else. But there's one thing that I would like to highlight, and this came out in the second disclosure package, that the Sex Crimes Unit spent 3 months in the summer of 2013 investigating me and cleared me of all these allegations, even without my evidence. So when the officers were on the stand, they lied with regards to saying that these things are pending and they want to charge me, but technicalities, there's nothing. I was cleared, point blank, and it's in print in the disclosure package. And I just want to make sure to anyone watching. Pause here for a second. Remember how I said that I would sleep at truck stops and parks and wherever I could in my vehicle when I was homeless in my province of origin? Well, and the police were real assholes. Well, they were. Looking back, the best dressed homeless guy I ever met. First sentence in my book, chapter 1. I wonder if these idiots thought that I was with or waiting for or finished with a hooker or something in parks and truck stops, not knowing that I'm a homeless guy who maintained my personal integrity and hygiene, just trying to survive. And somehow these idiots just, like any busybody, make uninformed conclusions, and they type shit in CPIC if that be the case. And it's funny because the police are constantly telling people, be careful what you post on social media, especially if it's false, because it has consequences to the innocent people. Yet these very same fucknuts do that with their CPIC, putting whatever the hell they want in their private social media, which no one else has access to. Now, I vented. Is this alleged history? This assumption? Now, the other part to this is, remember how I said she would stash money and her personal items in my vehicle, and I'd always give them back to her the next time I'd see her, which was always in a public place, like a Tim Hortons parking lot. And if some fucking idiot, busybody, seen me give her her money back and her personal items, jumped to the conclusion, because she was a lot younger than me, that I was paying for sex. First off, how in the fuck would anyone come up with that kind of solution? Why would it be impossible for somebody of such a big age difference not to be in a relationship? But no, people jump to these fucking conclusions. Now, it's alleged that she was in her early 20s, and apparently in her teens, it's alleged that she was a hooker. And when I had asked her one time, point blank, about that, she said no, it was a lie. So I don't know if she was or wasn't. I really don't give a shit. But the trial continues with this. The first lawyer I had, I fired during that 15-month adjournment. It was the Crown's adjournment. And got another lawyer. Now, by this time, I came into some money, and I paid him very well. And he ended up throwing my case under the bus. I took over the trial. There was a voir dire, a charter argument, that if the two officers were in the performance of their duty, and the ruling, and I tried to get my evidence and my submissions in before the ruling of the first voir dire, which was when I fired that second lawyer, and the judge refused it and made a ruling on the first voir dire that the officers were in the performance of their duties, complimented for a job well done, and used this whole false narrative by the female and prostitution and everything else as why I risked the officers' lives that night. Now, at some point, I didn't realize that the resisting arrest charge was dropped. Now, the officers were very clear. Those 3 separate charges for 3 separate things of that night. And then they were alleging that they charged me with sexual, some sexual others. They never even charged me that night. They charged me the next day. Where are these other charges? I was never went to trial for anything else but of obstruction and assaulting a police officer. They testified. In the end, it comes out that I was cooperative, that I wasn't verbally abusive, that I wasn't aggressive. This is what comes out in the end, through cross-examination and everything else. They testified. It's in print. And the officers sustained no injuries. I would also like to add that the officers testified to deleting the audio recording of that evening because I was with the female, audio recording my interaction with her. They testified to deleting this. It documented the time prior to their arrival, when they arrived, and to some point after they beat me. Now, I used to fight freestyle. I went undefeated twice in that career. Not that I'm Superman or anything, but that's the way it was. And I did a lot of other. My training career history is extensive, and I had employment that represented all that. So for Jabba the Hutt and some UK wannabe boxer to defend themselves against me, it's a joke. So I took over my case, another motion application in, which would become the second voir dire. Had all three audio evidence heard in open court, all my other evidence submitted, and the ruling of the second voir dire, the judge said he was wrong with accepting the whole false narrative and the prostitution and everything else. Now, at that moment, he should have recused himself, but he didn't. And in fact, I tried to get him to recuse himself, and anyway, the whole thing's a bloody mess. Trial continues. We go into the closing summations for the trial proper. Now, I've already established this whole false narratives and prostitution, everything else has been dealt with in the second voir dire. So, in the closing summations for the trial proper, all I used was the Crown's evidence, which was the two officers' testimonies to prove my innocence, which it does, hands down. I proved, and not only that, but I also proved that they weren't in the performance of their duties based on their own testimonies. I proved that their own testimony contradicted their own testimony, contradicted each other's testimony, as well as also contradicted both disclosure packages. Crown's evidence. Didn't even rely on my testimony or anything about what happened. I focused on the event of what the charges are based on. Now, the officer was very clear that the assaulting police officer was when I grabbed his wrist when he was choking me. He testified that he knocked me out, and as I was coming to, at some point, I guess I couldn't breathe, and that's when I grabbed him. That does not constitute assault. I had tons of case law to support every aspect of my closing arguments with regards to the Crown's evidence. Everything ignored. 36 months later, I'm convicted of assaulting a police officer in obstruction. And the trial judge was very clear in his ruling that the convictions are based on the fact that I allegedly hurt the officer's feelings, which is called disrespecting an officer. Very clear. 30 pages clear. He also said that if he is wrong, that the officers were not in the performance of their duties, that I should be charged with just common assault, which doesn't even make sense in itself. So he even challenged the charter argument that he ruled on, if the officers were in the performance of their duties or not. And then if they weren't in the performance of their duties, that would make them the aggressors assaulting me. So I couldn't be charged for assault, common assault. I mean, there's other things that he threw in there which, if you read it, it's like, seriously? So I filed my notice of appeal on all my materials. 39 months later, so so that was July of 2016 I was convicted. I argued, now keep in mind, until sentencing is done, the trial is still considered active. It's not concluded. I filed a Section 11B charter argument to be tried within a reasonable time. I used R versus Jordan, where it says for a provincial offense, the trials are not supposed to exceed 18 months. During the hearing on that, the Crown admitted that the trial at least exceeded to 20 months minimum. He admitted that he didn't anticipate his two witnesses, the two officers, complicating the trial with all this peripheral, unsubstantiated allegations. He admitted to making errors himself. In the ruling of that, the judge conveniently said 17 months, that was it, done. Which brings it 1 month below the 18. Now, I disagree with the Crown, a minimum of 20. I was looking at, I forget exactly, in the ballpark around somewhere minimum of 30, but whatever. They just want to be convicted. Now, my appeal starts, and I haven't been sentenced, so we had to wait for that to be done. So that was December I was sentenced. The judge said if I don't apologize, that he would give me 2 years less a day. The Crown was arguing, said, this Crown stood up intensely and spoke very assertively to the judge. You don't have to do that. There's always a suspended sentence as an option. But I refused to apologize. Why to apologize for what? I don't even know what the fucking case is about anymore. So he's 90 days, I can't leave the province, just all this other stuff. It ended up being 60 days. Served intermittently on the weekends, which I started to do January of 2017. The appeal judge, I made some typing errors, some simple stuff. For example, when I said May 4th, 2013, or I typed 2016, so I had to make amendments. He wouldn't do them on the spot, which was fine. He assured me that he read all my materials and went through everything in detail. And the Crown was arguing, the appeal Crown was arguing, they wanted an adjournment. And I was arguing against it, knowing that they would get the adjournment, but I made my argument. And the appeal judge looked at me and said, what if you were the one that would be appealing my decision? I'd want to be fair to both sides. And the primary strength of the appeal was the charter argument, Section 11B, which used to be called the ask-off, based on a case. I guess it might be called R versus Jordan now, or just Jordan. And then everything else was in support of a mistrial and everything else. So, which would have meant that the proceedings would have been stayed. My post-traumatic stress was greatly enhanced after doing a month worth of weekends. And so legal aid determined that they had 2 lawyers over. It took them 6 months to see that there was merit to my appeal. And both legal aid lawyers said that the primary focus on the appeal would be the Section 11B argument, which is I already did. Now, I have to say, up until sentencing, the Crown wasn't seeking jail time. So I wasn't eligible for legal aid. The day of sentencing, I found out he's looking for 90 days. And then ironically, when he tells the judge 90 days, judge is saying 2 years less a day, the Crown turns around and argues, no, suspended sentence is another option. Like seriously. This is how this whole fucking thing is transpired. And I'm leaving out tons of mind-numbing details, which everyone who knows this case intimately just are beside themselves. So I get a lawyer through legal aid. And I'm thinking, well, she can't fuck this up. My materials are filed. She wanted to put in her own version. I'm like, fine, whatever. She assured me, because of my background, that I was to leave her alone, which I did. And I moved back to my province of origin. Now, when I say I moved back, this shit here wasn't resolved, so the plan was, it was resolved, then I would set my roots back home. But I had to fly in on May 4th, 2017. Yes. What's that? 4 years later. Same date. And the judge that I had seized was replaced at the last minute by a different judge. And even the lawyer who was doing the appeal said that was kind of odd. I flew back the same day, and a friend of mine who's ex-law enforcement went for the ruling in June of 2017, a few months ago. I guess he wanted to hear the ruling and be able to call me and say, got good news. And dismissed. My appeal was dismissed. Well, it was pointed out to me in the amended appeal materials that this third lawyer did, completely excluded the Section 11B argument, completely excluded if the officers were in the performance of their duties argument, completely left out every major point of my appeal. She threw it. But before this was pointed out to me, it took her a week to email me what happened at the appeal. She said, well, your friend was there, he could tell you, it's not his job. I said, what's going on? What do we do about appealing this? And then she started going off how she's at her daughter's birthday party. She's probably drunk. She wrote it because it was just a mess. And that she's taken herself off record. That fast. Within weeks of the ruling. I was in shock. By now, I was in shock. I didn't even realize it. I ended up driving pretty much to the West Coast. Basically across Canada, and just a brain-dead mess. And then I find out that she threw my case under the bus. Now, for some strange reason, the appeal for the sentencing wasn't heard in June. It was set for yesterday to set a date. Well, the date has been set for December of 2017. 6 fucking months. From the ruling of the appeal being dismissed. So I went yesterday to get the date. Now there's 2 appeal grounds on this case. And they start to argue that I haven't filed my appeal for sentencing materials. And I said, yes, I did. And we were bantering back and forth before the court. And finally, it was the court clerk who verified what I was saying, that yes, it is filed. The judge, without saying anything, just got up and walked out. And I'm like, what's going on? What just happened? What did I just miss? He comes back in and then says, well, this is what he's saying. If the conviction appeal has been dismissed, then automatically the sentencing appeal is dismissed. And I'm thinking, this is fucked up. No, there's two different things going on here. And I'm saying, no, it hasn't been addressed. I wasn't there in June, but as far as I know, and finally, the original appeal crown steps forward and says, no, it hasn't been addressed. This is what I'm up against. So if the sentencing appeal is not to be heard until December, that means the Court of Appeal proceedings won't be starting until sometime in 2018. And that's where I'm at in life. I hope that this video, you're able to follow the story. I'm really struggling to get the words out. But here I am. For the sake of argument, destitute and homeless again. This time a lot worse. I'm disabled. Over the past several years, apparently I've had some sort of microstrokes. Actually, a year ago this month, last year, I had an event that left my left part of my neck and left shoulder with some mobility issues. And I was at that time when I found out that I'm supposed to be on an oxygen tank. Anyway, I doubt there's gonna be any more videos after this one.
And I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone over the years who've given me their support, their kindness. I'm very grateful. And even with what I've been going through in my life, I always try to help people as best as I can. There's that story of that young guy and his dog. I did the best I could, gave him my time. Maybe if he's watching this, I always wonder, dude, if you made it home. A few days ago, there was another guy. And I couldn't do much for him. Bought him a tea, and I talked to him for over an hour. He was so happy. He was so down. And he would say how people would make rude comments to him, telling him to get a job and everything else. And he said no one ever stopped to get his story. And apparently, he ended up having seizures, so he couldn't work, and he has to wait 6 more months. He can't even drive his vehicle, and he felt like he had his wife, 3 kids, and he feels like he let them down. And then talking to him, while he was working, he paid for his wife to go to school and carried the whole family. And now she's working in that profession that I guess he paid for her to go to school with, and not making a lot of money, but things would be a lot worse. And I said to him, I said, you didn't let your family down. It was your efforts that allowed your family to at least stay afloat. It may not be great, but I kind of hinted to him. I said, dude, go back home. You should be with your family. And he was so relieved after. He almost in a shy way, very, very articulate. He wasn't. He was educated. He was smart. He had a clear head, and he, in a shy way, he said, "Hey, I really enjoy talking with you. Do you mind if I have your number?" And sure. And I gave him my number. Unfortunately, I don't have cell service where I have cell service when I'm in cell limits, but I'm outside of cell limits. And then this lady, I seen her every so often in the park, like I go to the Tim's there. I'd see her going to her car, and I saw her go over and give him something, and I yelled over to her. She was next car over. I said, but one stall away. I just complimented her on helping him, and she just said, "Oh yeah, everyone needs help." And I said, "You ever talk to him?" She said, "No." I said, "He's not working because of, and this is his situation." She was so surprised. And then I briefly told her my situation. Very quick story. It's kind of embarrassing. And she's cute too, so it wasn't like she was cute. So it's very embarrassing. But I thought I'd just tell her my story. Anyway, all the video I'm gonna do. I hope this makes sense. And I lost everything. I have nothing left.
Please share this video. If you want to show support, you can write the following people, organizations listed, or any others you may think of. Any type of corruption, such as political, courts, and police, rely on compartmentalization, denial, damage control, and silence to get away with wrongdoings. Watching social justice snowflakes, Antifa types, busybodies, and feminists on YouTube shows the type of people who have monopolized positions of authority. Without many people stepping forward on my behalf, and silence on my case leaves me at a disadvantage. Too many innocent people fall prey to false accusations, police brutality, and corrupt court systems. Many innocent people in general. Daniel Holtzclaw and perhaps Stephen Avery come to mind. I support both, and I hope they will be freed soon. There are many high-profile cases like Moran who were exonerated decades later. There is no chance for countless people of smaller cases to be exonerated. Thus they live with the burdens imposed. It is these smaller cases that pave the way to the larger ones and the few we hear of. If this problem of society is to be fixed, it begins with the numerous smaller cases. Everyone focuses on the major cases and the most publicized ones. This creates the illusion that it is rare innocent people are convicted, as to maintain the illusion of the integrity of accusers, the police, court systems, and any other so-called professional involved. My fight for justice, my innocence, and my life has not helped me. In fact, it appears to have caused a vicious circle of more lies imposed on me, the more of my sharing facts. A lose-lose for all. At this point, I can only hope my fight helps others. What happens to some in society affects everyone in society. Forget about me. I'm a lost cause.